Okay, let's do this. Right and right, left and left. Spin and turn and a great big smile.
The concept of a game being updated or patched is really nothing new, even if some people like to think that it is. Updates for games today are sometimes looked upon in a negative light, with many saying that if the game had bugs, it shouldn't have been released to begin with. I can agree with that statement, to an extent. This is especially hard to argue against in the case of the dreaded Day 1 patch. With some of these patches on the first day the game launches being as large as 16 gigabytes, it's enough to make anyone pine for the good old days where you just put the game in and it worked. In reality though, games weren't as perfect as people remembered them to be, myself included. There were all kinds of glitches that made it into the final product. Whether it was a graphical error, a game-breaking problem, or simply terrible dialogue, you were stuck with that version for good. I owned Star Wars on the Game Boy as a child, and I'd even considered doing that as my first review, just so I could see if anyone else thought Obi-Wan looked like a stick figure, or a severed head placed on a wicker man. Upon closer examination, it looks like they just used black robes on a black background. That was a good idea. I eventually decided after trying to play through it again that it just wasn't worth the trouble. Not only was it a dull piece of licensed junk that barely did anything right, but it was glitchy too. If you swing your lightsaber as you start climbing a ladder, Luke Skywalker's sprite turns into this. This isn't a one-time thing either. This glitch is very easy to replicate. Sometimes you can break out of it, but sometimes the only way out is through the sweet embrace of death. Aside from that mentally scarring image, I'm not sure if it was even intentional for you to immediately game over if you die during the asteroid field segment, no matter how many continues you have left, nor if they intended for you to be able to hold down and left and never come close to hitting a single asteroid. Kinda makes this entire segment seem pretty pointless, doesn't it? I also wonder if they forgot to put a comma in when C-3PO mentions Sir R2-D2 at several points in the game. I guess he got knighted in one of the expanded universe novels. Aside from bugs and problems like those, old games also weren't afforded the luxury of offering quality of life improvements or balance changes that we have now, at least not in the same way. There were often updates to games before the digital age, but this was accomplished through a new run of cartridges or CDs more often than not. Donkey Kong Country, for example, had 3 North American releases. The original 1.0, followed by version 1.1 that had a bug fix and a slight alteration to a stage, and finally version 1.2, which had several more problems solved, but one new glitch involving the pause menu not stopping the ropes from swinging. The more things change, huh? Back then, I'm going to assume about 99% of players were probably unaware of these version differences, nor would they be clamoring to rebuy the game again because a few issues got resolved. Capcom was ahead of its time in a number of ways with Street Fighter II though. Not only did each new iteration of the game bring about new moves, new characters, and some slightly upgraded graphics and mechanics, but they charged full price for each new version. While DLC is a sore subject for some people, particularly pre-order DLC like with Goro and Mortal Kombat 10, at least we usually don't need to buy a new game every time we want a new edition these days. Updates to video games can also complicate things when you're trying to review them, I've found. Karate Master 2, not a few days after having posted my review, had a patch release that began to resolve some of the crashes and problems I'd experienced. The Dragon Ball Xenoverse review, which I swear I haven't abandoned by the way, has been put on hold because of this too. A sizable chunk of my issues with the game that I'd written for the video have been dealt with, or at least diminished in the April 14th patch, so I've had to restructure pretty much the entire thing. That's a very minor complaint though, and one that doesn't matter that much in the grand scheme of things, and to most people, not at all. If a developer fixes a problem that the players may have found and makes a review no longer correct, I'm more than okay with that. I'd much rather be wrong about something thanks to an update and have a better game as a result. That mentality of we'll fix it later is something that most players these days are getting tired of. And after the debacle that was the entire year of 2014 for AAA games, it's easy to see why. The fact that many companies can use these updates as a crutch to rush their games out the door is plain as day. The indie scene isn't free from this criticism either, of course. With so many games being in early access for very, very, very long periods of time, I've held off on playing them in these unfinished states for a number of reasons. After binging on Starbound for some time, my excitement for the game sank. if just because I knew I'd have to do it all again by the time the full version was finally complete. There's a real risk of fatigue here. Let's not forget about Space-Based DF9. That game was abandoned, and fans were basically told to complete the game themselves with mods if they wanted those previously promised features. I like Double Fine, and I'm not here to insult Tim Schafer or whoever did make that call, but you have to be spending a lot of the budget money on blow to make a decision like that. While we're on the subject of broken promises, Peter Molyneux joke. The game Prison Architect is something that looks very intriguing to me, but it's been in early access since 2013. Long development cycles are okay by me. I'd much rather they take their time with it and fine-tune the experience as much as possible. But the difference here is that people are able to buy it and play it in this unfinished state. I just personally would rather wait to buy it once it's finished so I won't have any false preconceptions based on an earlier, less stable version. For all I know, Assassin's Creed whatever could have its bugs ironed out now, but the world isn't about to forget what it once was anytime soon. While it's easy to focus on the bad, at its best, updates can simply improve an already great experience at no extra charge to those who purchased it. The game can potentially run better, include more options, and can sometimes even offer entirely new levels or game modes. Hyrule Warriors has offered a number of free patches that have increased the level cap, improved game stability, reduced load times, added new potions, the list goes on. It's a shame then that both Nintendo and Koei may be in need of an update or two themselves. Funny as it may sound coming from me, I'm actually optimistic about how developers can use updates to improve our experiences with these games. Freedom Planet's recently released turbocharged update has improved game performance and has support for more gamepads. A previous patch added functionality to the collectible cards in-game, in the form of unlockable music. They even added a cutscene that shows our protagonist's prison escape. It's admittedly kinda short and doesn't explain a lot, but most devs wouldn't even bother doing that. BioWare did something similar to that with Mass Effect 3. I'll admit I still have a bad taste in my mouth over that game's original ending, and the new one doesn't exactly satisfy me either. But let's not forget, that was a free update they gave to everybody. Whether or not you think this set a bad precedent with player feedback becoming a more influential force in game development, that's a topic for another day. But you have to admit, this sort of thing was just not possible for this digital age. It's a double-edged sword to be sure, and I'm not naive enough to think that it's all going to be positive from here on out. 2015 has already given us plenty to be skeptical of in regards to necessary patches and fixes, on-disc content locked away behind a paywall, and other things that made me want to drink this delicious clean spring water and go for a nice pleasant walk. Updates are a luxury that we weren't really afforded back in those fondly remembered, simpler times. With how much things have changed for better or for worse, we can only hope that this luxury is used for the good of everyone involved, and not just those in a rush to squeeze as much money out of us as possible before we notice something is wrong.